All right. Thank you for coming today to the Humanist Association of San Diego's weekly lecture series. Today we have David Oliverio, the Preaching Humanist. I met David months ago in Austin, Texas. David is a force of nature here in the heartland, going between Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, and Houston, and all around. David, who started off as a Pentecostal minister, son of a Pentecostal minister, who later became an evangelical humanist, spreads the good word of humanism, both through raving about our amazing philosophy and through direct action by helping the homeless, among other things. David has an incredible story, and David is with us today. Welcome, David, and welcome to the Humanist Association of San Diego's weekly lecture series.
Thank you, Jason, and thank you, you fine folks in San Diego, California. We call it California here in Texas. So let me, Jason has told me that I have about 45 minutes. Normally, when I give these talks, I stop normally at 30 minutes, but I'm going to give a quick little bio, tell you what I do, and then we can start the 45-minute clock. I didn't even ask you that, Jason. So today you're going to hear a roller coaster story. I have never, ever given a talk. Of all my talks in different humanist groups and on my Preaching Humanist YouTube show, has anybody ever asked me to give my personal deconversion story? Thank you, Jason. Now, I want to warn you, my last name's Oliverio. It's Italian. And I was raised Pentecostal. With the combination of those two, I can be very emotional. So I've never, ever talked about the painful experience that I've gone through. And I hope that I can get through it. There's some pretty down times, but I'm a very optimistic, cosmopolitan, secular humanist / atheist activist. Been doing this for years, and I'm going to end on a very good note. So basically, let me do, before we start the talk, like Jason said, I like the way you called me a evangelistic secular humanist. Yeah, I used to be a Christian evangelist and preacher. And I'm 63 years old. And what I do on Saturdays, besides my Preaching Humanist YouTube show, which is at the world famous atheist community of Austin. You may have heard of the Atheist Experience show, Talk Heathen, these other wonderful. I record my little show there as well. Since Corona, I've been doing it here, of course, on my iPhone. So what I do every Saturday morning is I go out and feed homeless people, and I wear my humanist or atheist t-shirts. Then I proceed to a particular destination here in Austin. I used to set up tables and booths for the atheist community of Austin up in Georgetown, which is a very conservative rural area, with atheist banners, humanist banners, and going down to good old San Antonio at the Alamo, and talking to people, normalizing unbelief to believers. So what I do, I go out, as I did yesterday, and I pass out these cards. This is a card I have made up. If you can see, it says the Austin Secular Communities. There are 5 different groups here in Austin. I've got their names and their websites for those that are looking for secular humanist communities. There's a lot of people leaving Christianity looking for something to replace it. I'm happy about that. Here's my little card, and secular humanism above and beyond religion and so forth. Then I hold up signs. This one here is my favorite, secular humanism, good without a God. Notice the little red spot there, that's tomato stains from the tomatoes that Christians throw at me. Don't do that. Couple other signs I have. I like to hold this one up, keep church and state separate, and of course promoting science and reason. So this is something that I love to do. I have great passion on spreading the word of secular humanism to theistic religion. So yes, I've been on both sides of the fence. So I'm going to go ahead and start my talk now. I'm going to try to keep it under 45 minutes. I'm going to do my best. And then hopefully we'll have time for Q&A. Now, I've decided to avoid the very, very painful moments of this. We all have our boohoo stories, right? I'm going to lead you through a couple of chapters of my life. And those of you that have come from fundamentalist evangelical Christianity understand where I'm coming from. Those of you who I say are very fortunate, and I'm a little jealous, but I'm happy for you. Those of you that go through the arduous journey of letting go of belief in God, the Jesus confirmation bias bubble, right? I want you to please have patience and understanding for those unbelievers you meet through the years who come out of hardcore Christianity. It's not easy, especially back in the 70s and 80s. It was harder back then than it is now. So I begin now with chapter 1. Chapter 1 is years 1957. Yes, I'm 63. That's back in the day, 69. My parents are both Italian. All four of my grandparents were Italian immigrants. They came over to in the 1920s. They converted quickly to Italian Pentecostal Christianity from Catholicism. We moved to Detroit. I was born there, my older brother and my sister. So my parents were about raising us in the Jesus bubble. We were in a large mega church in Detroit, Michigan. We went to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Friday night prayer meetings, youth groups on Saturdays. I didn't know anything else about the real world except for Christianity. I was immersed in Christianity from birth. I didn't have a chance, I thought. How can I escape this? You'll hear my story. I had two alpha male authoritarian fathers in my life. Number one, my invisible Father in heaven, who I believe exists. My friend, Hector, we'll be talking about that soon. My other authoritarian alpha male father was my biological father, a retired pastor. I was raised in authoritarianism. You don't obey them that have the rule over thee. That's a little King James from the New Testament. I was raised in an anti-education, anti-intellectualism, an anti-science world. I was raised that Charles Darwin was Satan's progeny. He was Satan's offspring. I never heard about science, never heard about intellectualism. In fact, my father and his pastor friends would mock the Northeasterners and the Northwesterners in Seattle, you folks in California, those liberals, those educated people, those secular people. It was all about Jesus, prayer, the Holy Ghost, and the Bible, and obedience and submission to God and to the man of God, the pastor. That was my upbringing. Now, chapter 2, chapter 3, 4, 5. Chapter 2, 1969 to 1976. My dad was in preparation to become a pastor in that large mega church in Detroit. He was sent to a small church in Waco, where there are more Christians than people, in 1969. 100 miles north of here and 100 miles south of Dallas, right in the middle of the state. We moved from suburban white neighborhood Detroit. It was a culture shock for me as an 11 and 12-year-old boy. I went to school that year in middle school, I don't know, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. I saw black children, brown children, and everybody talked like this. It was a little different world. I was called a Yankee, but I noticed something. Everybody went to church. I was already used to that. I liked it. Everybody went to church. So I started experiencing my teenage, you've heard the preacher story, kid story. It's hard, kid. You're in a bubble. So I started rebelling in my teens. I graduated from 1975. Little did I know I was attempting to break free from control, shame, and guilt. I don't have time to go over that upbringing. Lots of distortions, sexually, in many other ways. A lot of guilt. I didn't know any way out. Didn't know anything else. I didn't experience in my rebellious years any drugs. I tried some alcohol. My father and I never got along. There were a lot of physical beats. He took the Bible literally. Proverbs chapter 22, Proverbs chapter 24. You use the rod of instruction to beat and to remove hell from your child, to keep them on the straight and narrow. To produce character in them, you use the rod of instruction. They took that literally. So I will stop there. I don't need to go any deeper. So it's very, very controlling atmosphere. I didn't know what was going on. My rebellion was trying to be free from that daddy and this daddy. Little did I know I had this innate free-thinking mind. I didn't know what science was, didn't know what critical thinking, didn't know what doubting and skepticism was. But I already had a little inkling in my mind. Now, chapter 3, 1976 to 1989. I call this my fire for Jesus preaching years. In 1976, the year after I graduated from high school, I was at a low time. I was already indoctrinated to believe that happiness and love and joy comes from Jesus. I've been away from it for a couple of years and I came back. I succumbed. I came back and gave in to my heavenly in my life and my father. There was a great influence in my older brother and I. We used to hear it from the pulpit as children. My father would say, it would honor me greatly, not my little sister, because this is very patriarchal, male-dominated religion. It would honor me greatly if my two followed my footsteps and the anointing of God were upon them for preaching. Well, he got his wish come true, his dream come true. So I came back to Jesus and I gave in. I was called to preach. I thought I heard the voice of God. I already had the ability of public speaking. Nurture nature for me comes easy. My dad showed my brother and I how to work the crowds in church before and after service. He told us how to be more outgoing, even though by nature I'm actually a little more of an introvert than extrovert. I'm kind of a hybrid. That surprises people, especially those who have gone out with me with my activism. So I came back to Jesus at age 19, called to preach, and immediately, almost immediately, I started study and prayer. And literally, I'd get up at 4 or 5 in the morning. I was 19 years old. I was working for Sears and Roebuck, where America used to shop. And I would get up and pray for 2-3 hours in the morning, literally, praying in tongues. We did it all. Anoint the sick with oil, dancing in the spirit, Jericho marches. Don't have time to go over all this stuff. Very amusing. Reading the Bible, studying the Bible, memorizing scripture, all in preparation for pulpit ministry. 6 months later, I started preaching. In nursing homes, I bring singers with me. I play piano. I still play. I write love songs. And then I would preach. Jimmy Swaggart was my idol. Yeah, I know it's embarrassing. But back then, Jimmy Swaggart, my idol. Second to Jesus, of course. I started preaching at local youth groups in other Pentecostal churches in Waco. I started alternating Sunday nights with my older brother, preaching in my father's church, all working full-time at Sears and Roebuck. 1981, let me move you along quickly. Two major things happened. I got married. My father's influence was, son, you need credibility to be a young man of God. You need to be married. And there was a young lady in the church. We liked each other. One thing led to another. We got married. 1981. Now, here's the interesting thing. Now, most parents, I have a 35-year-old daughter, 36-year-old daughter, married with, I have 3 girls. Her and her husband and kids live in Dallas. And my 34-year-old son, who lives in Dallas. Interesting. After I got married, my father married us, my first wife and I. He took us aside, and rather than what most people do, like I did my daughter, most of you who have married off your kids, you hug them, you tell them you love them, you're here to support them. They're on their own. They're adults. They don't need a mommy or daddy anymore, right? My dad took me aside with my new bride and said, I want your respect. I demand your honor and your obedience because this is God's way. I was still trying to break away from this control. But I got my dream and my wish came true in 1981. My mother said, come on, son, come on board full time. My brother had already been full time for a year. They used to call us Mafia. My father was a senior pastor. My brother and I were the 2 right hand, left hand, whatever. I was the staff evangelist. I was the staff youth pastor and the staff music minister. I was a busy, young, happy preacher in my early mid-20s. I started traveling to speak in churches around the country. My father's friends and all these Pentecostal churches, I don't have time to tell you, all around, except for California. I hadn't been there yet. Started going around there, and I noticed my passion was to fire up other believers to win souls for Jesus. I wrote personal evangelism courses. See, I'm old school. I even use it today on paper. And I would teach people to go door-to-door witnessing, how to go into people's homes, win them to Jesus. And I'll tell you how serious I was about my relationship with God. When I was married, I remember going to the lake with my new family, my wife's family, wonderful people, my in-laws, their whole family. And I would just walk off and leave. And I remember my wife telling me at the time, she said, well, my parents said, where's David? And she had to cover for me all the time. Well, he's just being David. And they said, what does that mean? Well, he goes around and tells people about Jesus. Now, looking at a guy who's been in that world, folks. I know what it's like. I would do that often. Now, 1983, my brother and I, this is a terrible thing, but it happened. We had a split in the church, my brother and I against my dad. A lot of it was young, I was stupid, I was ignorant. I took my wife, we quit the church. I moved to Dallas. My brother and his wife moved back to where she was from, New Orleans, Louisiana. Now, I took about a year or 2 off of preaching in 1980, moved to a big mega church in Dallas. I was not very happy because I missed preaching. So I started preaching on the weekends. Then I heard the voice of the Lord. You've heard people from my background talk about that, right? It's really just in your head. So I thought God told me to go back to Waco to start my own church. Moved back to Waco. My daughter was already born in 84. My son was about to be born in 1986. Went to Waco. 2 of my closest friends from childhood were my assistants. we rented a rat-infested building in downtown Waco. With Christian fellowship. Got that good Pentecostal flavor to it. We went out and won souls for Jesus on the street. Street people, anybody we could find. I stayed there for 2 years and built it up to 65 or 70 people. Enough people to support me and my 2 little babies and my wife. And then something happened 2 years later. I thought I heard the voice of God instruct me to move to Phoenix, Arizona. Give up the church, go to Phoenix, and reconcile your relationship with your father. Because my father had moved to Phoenix, helping another older pastor in his church. So here I was, babies and my wife, in a 1983 beat-up Chevy Chevette across the mountains of West Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Felt like the Beverly Hillbillies in a little beat-up car. We moved there, stayed there for 3 months. It didn't work. We fought constantly, my father. Moved back to Waco 3 months later to start another church. Yeah, my poor wife at the time, exactly. We moved back to Waco and I started my second church in a more rural area, right outside of Waco. And I called that one Tri-Cities Christian. Now, interesting thing to know, from 87 to 89, here's where it gets really good. I started a slow psychological evolution. I didn't know anything about evolution. I thought things were static, always the same, because God, today forever, I am the Lord God and I change not. Everything stayed the same. You have 100% fact and truth. I started noticing my teaching and preaching in the second church changed. I couldn't preach the hell concept anymore. I started smiling more when I taught. I started teaching about the love of Jesus. Little did I know I was evolving extreme right-wing Christianity to more of a moderate, almost progressive liberal type Christianity. And you know the type of progressive liberal Christian friends and allies I have as far as politics, right? I meet them all the time. I started that journey, but I started having more and more doubts. By 1988, 1989, I started doubting. I started having problems in my life which I never had before. Before I was married and before I had 2 little babies, it was just me. It was easy. Faith was easy. God provided all my needs. He was good. But now I had a wife and 2 little kids to feed. The money wasn't coming in. Those precious promises of God that I preached, I don't know where this thinking came from, but I began to apply scientific method to the promises of God. My God will supply all of your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. But I didn't see anything happening. The provisions were not there. I had to work 2 or 3 jobs, preaching on the weekends. I was a janitor scrubbing toilets at night, selling mattresses in the day, spending time with my kids and wife here and there and preaching. I was killing myself. Life's pressure started happening in my life. I began crying out to God like I never had before. Where are you? I went on 3 to 4 day fasts. That's what we did back then. And just prayed and cried out to God, waiting for an answer. This is all I knew. I was becoming more and more depressed. We started having marital problems. At my lowest moment, and now you've heard believers say this many times. At my lowest moment, I cried out to God and he delivered me, right? Well, it didn't happen to me. At my lowest moment, I cried out to God in my depression, in my marital problems, my financial problems. He never heard anything. Now, I know faith can justify anything. And believers me through the years, well, David, he was testing your faith, like Job and so forth, right? There's always a justification in faith. And I started thinking of 1 Corinthians 13 and what Donald Trump calls 1 Corinthians 13. When I was a child, I believed like a child. I spoke like a child. I behaved like a child. When I became a man, an adult, a woman, I put aside childish things. My evolution continued to change, and I started thinking what I call like an adult. These in the Bible, I felt were like children's fairy tales. By 1989, I couldn't preach anymore. And my wife at the time started having doubts as well, crying out to God. Our marriage was drawing further apart. I stopped preaching, but I still believed in God. I tried everything I could. I could not let go of God yet. So we decided to move to Austin. I let go of another church. Bye. We're leaving. They were very upset, very hurt. I lost all my friends. I lost my whole church family. I was called backslider. You're going to end up being an atheist, the whole thing, right? It was very painful. So I remember my father's friend had a church in Austin, down here in Austin. There was a mega church in North Austin. And I called this man. He knew me. And I told my story. He said, David, come here. We'll take care of you. Come get healed up. We'll love you back to Jesus, and you can go back out and preach. Come here. We'll help you. I told him my story. We went to a service the first week we moved to Austin. My wife and I dropped the kids off at the nursery. It must have been 600 people in that big church. It was one of those big gymnasiums with the Jesus banners, dominionism. I forgot to tell you that. I was all into dominionism, the whole thing. Now, this pastor heard my story, and then in Pentecostal churches, those of you that know my background have been raised like me. We used to give words of prophecy, like Pat Robertson. I have a word of knowledge. God speaking to me, right? The pastor literally stood there, and my wife and I were standing there, probably in the middle of the auditorium. He said, God is speaking to me today. There is a young couple here that was once used mightily of God. And you're wounded, and Satan's been after you. And God restore you and heal you today if you come to the altar. I couldn't believe it. I looked at my wife. She looked at me, and she said, he already knew that. I said, I know. That disturbed me. As soon as the service was over, we got up, went to the nursery, grabbed our kids, and went home. He called me and asked me why I left. I said, Pastor, I told you my story when I came in to talk to you. And then you said that was the word of God. That moment right was one of the straws that began to really break the camel's back for me. I remember lying on the hood of my car one night. My in-laws came down to visit from Waco. They were in there visiting the kids, my kids. And on the hood of my car. I didn't know anything about science, cosmology, atoms, molecules, nothing. We didn't even teach that at our school in Waco. I don't remember any of it. Maybe I slept through it. I lied on the hood of my car, and I looked up. It was a clear night, and I saw the stars. And I thought, oh my goodness. Okay, it's the first time I've ever talked about this. So, yeah. When you come from my background, it's pretty hard. So I looked up at the stars. I thought, could this be all there is? Matter? There's nothing else up there? Now, let me move you to chapter 4, 1990 to 2005. By 1990, we're still in Austin. I call this my recreating reconstruction years. I had to learn how to live in this God-free naturalistic world. How do you find meaning in life without Jesus? How do you find happiness, morals, ethics, compassion, altruism? My past life, what do I do now? I didn't have a computer. I didn't have any friends. I didn't know what a secular humanist was. It was just me. I felt like a blank slate. And by then, I felt like I'm an atheist already. I could not comprehend reality because the glasses that I wore for the first 32 years of my life, it was easy. You had your friend, your family. Faith is easy. Trust the Lord. The God glasses were gone. It was brutal. I don't want to go into all the detail to get through it. The emotional turmoil and the depression and so forth. But I came to a point in my life in 1990, I had to make a choice. I could have gone back to my old life. It was easy. Back to the loving arms of Jesus, back to my friends. They would have accepted me back. I would have been forgiven. It would have been easy. But something in this little brain of mine, with no education, was different. It was like, no, I can't go back. There's got to be something over here on this side of the fence. I just did an episode on the greener grass of secular humanism. What's really on the other side of the fence? I just recorded it a couple days ago. It'll be on my show Wednesday when it's released. I didn't know what was on the other side of the fence. I was told it was a world of nihilism, like the prodigal son. Remember that story? You leave the father, you'll end up wasteful, depressed, miserable. Sin and depression. Well, I decided to keep ahead, to retrain my life, to recreate my life, and reconstruct it. We moved back to Waco in 1990. Again, roller coaster. Now, I began the slow, arduous journey of how to live a good life in a natural, God-free world. I had no idea how to do it. I had thoughts of suicide many times. My wife at the time, when I would tell her, I'm going to be back in a couple hours, she was always fearful that I would never come back. She knew how depressed I was. I would go off in the woods all by myself and just cry, depressed. But I knew I couldn't go back. I didn't know what to do. I was hurt. I was wounded. I hated people. I hated myself. And I know Christians would hear that and go, aha, this is what happens, like the prodigal son. Oh, no. It gets better here in just a moment. Much, much better. But at that time, a complete unknown. And you fellow baby boomers remember Bob Dylan's song in the 60s. I wanted to be an unknown. I wanted to get away from people, just be alone. Now, it gets really good. I begin to learn and read. The first book I ever read outside of the Jesus bubble, ever, was a book on the life of Charles Darwin. That he was this evil monster. He was Satan's offspring, progeny. I read about his little journey on the Beagle, and literally I was in tears. I started learning about the natural world. I started reading books on natural selection, evolution. I didn't know anything about it. I saw that these pieces of the puzzle fit much better than try Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created everything. This made sense, this science stuff. I started reading books on sociology, evolutionary psychology. Now, I'm no expert in any of this, but I know the basics. Cosmology of the universe, human behavior, human. I was alone with my thoughts, my books, and my personal experiences. I didn't have a computer, didn't have the American Humanist Association, didn't have you find folks and communities that are popping up all over now. I was alone. By 1994, my wife and I were this far apart. I was already in God. We divorced in 1994, and from 94 all the way to 05, I stayed in Waco as a closeted atheist, learning and reading, and not coming out of the closet because my two kids were very involved in the community. Very Christian, very Fox News, fair and balanced, Reverend George W. Bush, if you know what I'm talking about. Pure Christian. If they would have known their father was an atheist, it would have made their life hard. I remained there until my youngest child, Jordan, graduated from high school in 2005. My daughter was already off and he went off to college. They were gone. I'm ready to go to the next part of my life. Chapter 5, 2005 to present. My coming out and my active years. Both of my kids were gone. I was free. I moved to Austin, back to Austin. Now, two things happened in 05. It was the first time I actually met fellow atheists and humanists and secular people. I was alone with my mouth shut in little old Waco for those 15 years. Now, I remember going to a pot Austin, never heard of it. And I was already applying this critical thinking and rational type science I still enjoyed this way of life. And I remember going and seeing all these atheists together. I stood back, folded my arms, and just observed human behavior. And I thought to myself, this is unbelievable. I was always told that these people have no hope, love. They're terrible parents. And I noticed these people here, these unbelievers, were the same as the believers. Analogous throughout humanity. This thing called love, this thing called caring and empathy, compassion for each other. It was exactly like Christians. I know that who were raised for secular in education, but for me, it was a big eye-opener. One more thing happened in 05. My younger sister remains a very strong Baptist. She's a sweetheart of a person, but she's very strong Baptist. They raised her two daughters who are married now. One married a Baptist missionary, right? She had a birthday party in 05. She invited me. Little did I know, make a long story short, that I entered her home for her birthday party with 40 to 50 Southern Baptists from her little church. They all knew who I was. And in that 2-hour span, I'm out there in this home, talking to people, having fun, giving them personal training tips because I had to do something. I became a personal trainer. And I noticed a lady walked up to me with this concerned look on her face. She put her hand on my arm and she looked up at me and said, "You're David, aren't you? Denise's brother." I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I've heard about you." I went, "Oh, wow, woohoo, I'm famous." She goes, "I want you to know that I'm praying for you." And then she walked off. Now I'm thinking to myself, is something wrong with me? Do I have leprosy? Am I sick? The next 2 hours, there must have been 15 to 20 people that came up to me saying the same thing. I'm praying for you. I've heard about you, David. And finally, my sister and two women came up and did the same thing. And finally, I was a little slow. It hit me. And I said, excuse me, ladies, what is wrong with me? Everybody keeps saying, you're praying for me. Is there something wrong with me? And they just looked at me and they said, we're praying for you. And they walked off. They wouldn't give me an answer. I went, sat down by myself at a table. Two gentlemen came, and they were attempting to love me back to Jesus, as if I don't know what this thing called love is. It's amazing. You know, what is this thing called love? I'm an atheist. You priests, tell me what it is. I don't know. And I'm thinking to myself, this is ridiculous. And then the big gun came. I looked up and this huge 6'5" big Texan came straight to me, just staring at me. I call that the alpha male intimidation look. I get it every weekend with my signs. And he walked right up to me, stared at me. Hi, I'm the pastor of this church. I went, oh, hey, how you doing? And he just stared at me. I said, so nice party, huh? He goes, I've heard about you. I am praying for you. And I don't remember what I said to him. So I went home, called my sister. I was pretty upset. I said, Denise, I told her what happened. She said, well, David, you're an unbeliever. We need you to come back to Jesus. Now, let me tell you the reason I told you that story. That moment, that night, triggered me into what I do now. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I had an opportunity to do what I used to do. I had 40 people there. I could have showed them about my story and how my life is actually better. From that moment on, I started going out and talking to Christians everywhere I could. That's 15 years ago. I'd go into churches between clients. I'd go to my clients' homes. I'm a mobile person. I'd go into Pentecostal churches. I'd try and learn all this different style of activism. But one thing I realized, I wasn't quite mature, grown out of my simple atheism into my secular humanism. I was an angry atheist. I was wanting to fight with Christians. I thought they were stupid. I thought they were bad. I wanted to give it to them, right? I learned through the years how to talk to people and to love all people. Now let me move you up to 2012. I started feeding homeless people. I noticed the need, so I just started going where I see homeless people, and all I found were Christian groups. So I went up to them and said, can I help you? And they said, sure, what church do you belong to? Actually, I'm an atheist. And wham, there it was again, the same thing, trying to convert me. So I started doing it on my own. I discovered the atheists helping the homeless, started helping them, and now I do it on my own. In 2015, I started my Preaching Humanist show on YouTube. Been doing it for 5 years. It's different. I actually give similar messages and promoting secular humanism. In 2016, I resumed public speaking. I started speaking in humanist groups in Houston, here in Austin, and a few in, until Corona hit. Now it's all Zoom. Now I'm almost finished. 2018, let me bring you up to 2018. 2 life moments. Number one, my style of activism completely changed in 2018. Now I would take teams with me from different groups that were interested in activism. They want me to show them how to do it. So I said, come on with me. I would actually take people out to Starbucks, almost like a job interview, to make sure that they were not really angry and they were ready to be kind to people. And I wasn't even ready yet. I wanted to make sure that we were able to talk with people and respect them. I remember going to the Alamo, and I took the team with me, and I had them all spread out with our signs, passing out literature. And I talked to a young Baptist pastor, his best friend, and their little children. And the two kids, about my grandkids' age, 8, 7, 6, 8, 9, somewhere around there, looked at me and said, my daddy told us that anybody that doesn't believe in Jesus deserves hell. This came from a little 7-year-old girl, 8-year-old boy. And I looked at the young man, I said, dude, you're killing me. He goes, I've taught my kids the right way. I got on my knee to the little sweetie pie girl, like my granddaughter's age. I said, sweetie, look around here at the Alamo. Do you see all these people? I don't see a lot of wicked and sin. I see loving mommies and daddies. I see grandmas and grandpas. Most people are happy and good. And she said, no, most people are going to hell. And then I said to the boy, her brother, what do you think would happen to your father, this man who loves you very much, if he didn't believe in Jesus? And he smiled and looked me right in the eye and said, he would deserve to go to hell. And I looked up at this young man, the father. I said, you're killing me, man. How could you raise your children this way? And I remember how I was raised. So I started seeing that even evangelical Christians are very similar to us. That's my style now. We have a lot in common. We would agree on ethics 85 to 90%. They just don't know there's a better way. But I still wasn't quite there. I was still looking for a fight. The very next month, I took the team back with me to San Antonio. And I had two older, a black couple. They were like missionaries, evangelists. And they had heard about me, and I was doing a little video with one of my young guys in my team. And they interrupted me. They came right behind me very rudely and started talking to me when I was doing a video. I turned around and they just started at it. Just, you're the guy that used to be a preacher. How could you do this and all that? I said, folks, we have things in common. We're all human. We have this thing called love. We have the common moral decencies of humanism. We have empathy and sympathy, love. You just believe it comes from this. We don't. We believe it's human. I said, we're more alike than you think we are. And I was trying to make it easy. I was trying to diffuse an angry believer, which happens often. He looked at me, put his finger in my face and said, we are nothing alike. Jesus said you're either for us or against us. Now, from at that moment, I walked off and I said, I can't do this. I can't deal with these people. I walked off because I'm not one of those philosophical debaters. I would rather give them a message, right? I went off and I sat down and one of the guys came up to me and said, what's wrong? I said, I can't do this style anymore. From that day on, that was 2 years ago, I started doing nothing but studying more and more secular humanism. Corliss Lamont, Paul Kurtz, all the others, right? All the branches of humanism. And I started seeing that my atheism is simply without belief in a God. You know that. I'm talking to mature people here. But secular humanism is above and beyond that. I'm still an atheist, a very strong atheist, but that doesn't do anything for me. Doesn't give me values, ethics, happiness, all the other things. We have something to replace theistic religion. Now, presently, I go out and I promote. I go out there and normalize. Yesterday morning, here in Austin, I had 3 people approach me, 3 that were looking for communities. I had an African-American engineer, a brilliant man, walk up to me and said, I lost my family. My wife and kids left me because I couldn't believe in God anymore. I'm looking for communities. I'm dying here. He was a Jehovah's Witness. And I said, somebody needs to go out there and let these people know, because folks, I'm telling you, the thing about debate, this ontological argument from design, teleological argument from design, cosmological argument, we've been doing that for 2,000 years. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but you cannot break through a mind of faith, because faith is the certainty and the assurance of things hoped for. It is the evidence of things not seen. That's their evidence. How do you break through a mind of faith unless they're open? So I started thinking, not many people are actually out there promoting something as an alternative. And since I've been doing this, I've had more and more people come up. Had 2 angry believers come up yesterday. After 5 minutes talking to me, they said, oh, I understand now. You're not what I thought you were. I thought you were trying to take away our right to believe in God. Literally. I thought you were trying to burn our churches down. One guy said, no. We want equality and freedom for everybody. But I always throw in, but you got to keep your grubby hands off of the public schools and the Constitution and the wall of separation of church and state and so forth. What I promote in secular humanism is not perfect. It has its flaws, but folks, it's the best thing we got right now. I'm convinced that the philosophy, the worldview, the life stance, this human-centered life stance is more superior than these outdated belief systems. We have the 4 progressive values of secular humanism: truth, altruism, freedom, and equality. Like the great Carl Sagan said about science, it's the best thing we have to understand the natural world, the scientific method. It's not perfect, but it's the best thing we got. We have something to share. And my job now is, I've been called a motivational speaker, trying to get my fellow secular people to understand what we have. And there are people falling off the Christian tree every day. This younger generation, I talk to them every weekend. The nuns, they used to be religious. Many of them were, they can't believe it anymore, but they don't know what replaces it. Many of them gravitate toward New Age spiritualism. That's a step in the right direction, but they're getting there. But we've got a harvest field. The old evangelist in me. The harvest is plentiful, the laborers are few. It's easy pickings. When I go out there, hold up my sign, smiling, loving on people, tell them about humanism. There are even atheists, young atheists out there who have never even heard of humanism. They say, we are looking for something like this. I had a young couple come by the other day. I told them about the groups. I gave them my card. And she literally said, I've never heard of humanism. She goes, we're looking for something. Friends and communities. Like-minded people. Here you go. Think about what I'm saying, my friends. It's more than just debating whether God exists or not. We can't disprove that. They can't prove it because it's just an idea in the head. I talk about this in my show. I prefer, this is my spoke in the wheel. We all have a spoke. There are many great philosophical debaters I rub shoulders with here in Austin, big name people. They do great work. They're brilliant. That's not my job. I'm not wired that way. But we need more and more people to get out there and just talk to people and show them that we're not mad, we're not evil, we're not angry. We're similar to you because we're all human. I tell them about Confucius, Aristotle, the Stoics, Epicurus, all the humanistic moral philosophies that preceded Christianity. They don't know that. I tell them. And some of the stuff in the Bible is good. Some of my atheist friends don't like me saying that, but it's true. I don't throw the baby out the bathwater. The Good Samaritan, feeding the homeless, clothing the naked, housing those that do not have a place to live. Simply humanism. That's all it is. Christians don't understand that. So we have a message. There are people out there that don't even need to have debate. They're already coming to this on their own like I did. But now it's much easier. Now we have communities, we have information, we have the internet, we have something. Folks, it's not perfect, but it's the best thing we got. It is better. All right, thank you so much. I did it without breaking down. And that was a little tough.
Thank you, David. Everyone, unmute yourself and give David a warm round of applause.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Very cool.
Thank you. Very good. Very interesting.
David, are you willing to take some questions and answers and open this?
Yes. Yes. Let me sit down.
All right. If you're not speaking or asking a question, please mute yourself again. And then if you get too many questions in a row, then we can raise hands. And the hand raise feature in the participation.
I'm happy to start.
Go ahead.
Yeah, David, Dave Rice here. Hey, thanks so much. This has really been a wonderful talk. And I think that certainly myself, my guess is that most everybody on this call is going to 100% agree with you in, what you're saying. Just real quick, I had a similar sort of a background, missionary parents, grew up overseas, evangelical, whole nine yards.
Yeah.
Took me till about age 40 to finally leave, and ended up having to leave family and friends, and went through a lot of the same kinds of things, and have been on a mission since then to try and figure out how to grow the secular movement and especially humanism, and make it come together, which is, sort of where my heart is. So my question for you is, it's great, and I love that you're out doing what you're doing, and I agree, we probably need more folks like you doing it. There's something about humanism that, sort of almost discourages people from evangelizing, because there is this sense of, hey, it's just freedom of choice, it's freedom of belief. And so, rather than the Christian who is trying to convert others so that they don't go to hell or whatever, we don't have the same motivation that way.
Sure.
But I totally agree with you that we, for the benefit of the world, for the benefit of so many of our social problems, there's such a need to educate people on humanism. And you're right, so many even in the atheist community still don't really understand it. So my question to you is more around, what's your feeling? What are you seeing about, sort of creating like brick and mortar churches or ongoing communities that are, humanist and especially that can create the kinds of programs that we have in churches with kids and kids programs and all that. There just seems to be such a huge need there, a huge gap.
Yeah.
I see that we have that in certain parts of our humanist communities, which would be like Unitarian Universalist churches, which many are fundamentally humanist, and they define themselves that way. They have kids programs. So I'm really interested in reaching out to them more and trying to engage more. I know that the secular Jewish communities are mostly humanist. So we in the Southern California Secular Coalition that Rhett talked about, we're pulling in a lot of those kinds of groups. But what's your thought about how we can keep building those kinds of communities?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Thank you. I think about this all the time. When I drive around the city here in Austin, I see these large buildings that are churches, right? Especially the large mega progressive churches.
Right.
And I think to myself, why couldn't we have, I'm being a little idealistic here, I know, but I look at there and I look up the name, if we just replace the Jesus and the Christian and put something humanist community, Austin or whatever city, pattern after, again, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It does work. Those churches know what they're doing. They know how to get people together. They know how to give meaning in life for people, to answer the existential questions, even though half of it is a lie, but they know about the community part.
Yep.
So, the structure's there, the business is there, it's all set. I would like to see that, but the problem is, I've been involved in this for a long time now here in the Austin community.
Yeah.
My experience, I don't know about you folks in Southern California, here in Central Texas, a lot of the atheists don't want that. A lot of them think it reminds them of church.
Right.
Now, it could be they're still at their adolescent stage of atheism like I was. They're still at that angry stage, and they hate everything to do with church. They still have that bitter taste in their mouth. But once you get over that, I can walk into a church now and just be as friendly as ever because they're fellow humans. I don't agree with a lot of it. But if we could get to that point and convince some other people that some of us in the unbelieving community miss the good part of church, but not all. And I have a lot of people that come up to my signs and they go, hey, thanks for being out here. I'm a fellow non-believer. And I go, thank you. And I go, hey, we've got groups here, communities, if you're interested. And you know, a lot of them tell me, nah, I don't need that. I've got my friends. We're all atheists. And I get that. It's not for everybody. So I don't know what to tell you other than I think it can be done, but it takes commitment. We don't have the money, the resources. They've been doing this for thousands of years. We're the new kids on the block. I know humanism's been around, but this concept is new. You know what? Excuse me. I failed to mention, I don't mean to interrupt you, one of the most important parts of my thing. 2018, my father disowned me. So I'm disowned by my father. That was a whole part of my story I was going to get to, but life goes on. So
I do think that there's an opportunity. There's so many people leaving Christianity, like you said, and there's so many pastors that are leaving Christianity and have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And you know, they're not trained for any other jobs. And it seems like they are a perfect group to be going after to try and actually help work on this idea. Certainly we're creating celebrants to do, you know, ceremonies and marriages and funerals and all of that, and that's cool. But yeah, I think it's there to be had. It'll be really interesting, you know, to see how our whole humanist, you know, society here can keep growing like that. And to me, it's a little bit of a, if you build it, they'll come. I don't think it'll attract everybody like you're saying. I think there's a subset, but I do think there's enough clearly that want it, and especially with the youth programming. So anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, Oasis, you've heard of the Oasis Network. They've done a pretty good job. The big one in Houston, I've spoken at a few times. They have 75 to 100 people every Sunday morning. And they're doing pretty good. They need to be a little more out there with signs, but other than that, they got it down. It's a really good community.
All right.
Thank you.
David, how you doing?
Hi.
So I have I'm kind of the opposite. I started out in science, not that I've left science and atheism. Actually born Jewish, and now I'm a born again Christian believer.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome.
So I don't, you know, maybe that's a Texas South thing where you despise education, but up in New York, we're pretty hardcore on education, science, and those disciplines, mathematics, what have you. But anyway, would you say that you were in the Word of Faith prosperity gospel camp? Would that be where your roots would be?
Not quite. No.
Pat Robertson is one of those, and you know, kind of.
Robert Tilton, all those. Yeah, I know. I've met Robert Tilton, Kenneth Copeland. They were right up the road.
Oh yeah. I'm also not big on those people either myself, but it's funny that you're still into evangelism and you kind of want to do the same thing. It's funny. It seems like it's in your nature that it doesn't matter what you were into, you'd be evangelizing it and wanting to start a group of some kind.
But see, there's nothing, and that's good because there's nothing wrong with that. That's the good part of church. And what you guys do, you believe that what you have benefits society, right? It increases societal health. We do the same thing. We just have a little different this versus this. But if you have something that you believe is going to help other people, to me, I don't let it hide. I don't hide it under a bushel. Remember that one?
Yes.
I got a T-shirt.
I know all those scriptures.
Yeah, of course. I have a T-shirt. Let the light of secular humanism shine. So I have a lot of Christian friends. Usually the progressive liberal ones. They're not far right ones, but and they know what I do. They have no problem with me. They have no problem with me. We're good friends. So yeah, I believe that that's free speech. I think that some of us are wired that way. And I don't expect others to do this. Very few people do what I do. I just want to encourage people to get a little more involved and at least support people that do different types of things. Kind of like you guys do, right? You have a well-set, organized system.
More or less. Like an
Right. So, Rhett.
organized mob.
Okay. So, Rhett, you have a question?
Oh yeah, I just had comments and questions. Well, one, I appreciate Keith you being here. That's really awesome. I often visit, Christian groups. I feel like I like to bridge the gap. But mostly David, yeah, thank you so much for your presentation today. So awesome. Obviously, I can tell that it took a lot of effort for you to present this. Clearly, you have some, painful past memories of some of your background. Some parallel mine. I think you had it a lot worse than I did. I was a little younger and independent when I left my faith. And so I was kicked out of my church. I was kicked out of my house that I lived in. I got fired from my church job.
Wow.
And I felt that pain of just not having that, sense of community, also kind of a survivor, right? So I found a new house. I found a new job, but I didn't have as many family connections that you did. That was painful. I had one family member was a Christian, one was an atheist. So I was always pleasing one and not the other. And they kind of went, bounced back and forth a few times. But yeah, I mean, just thank you so much for sharing. I've got a teaching myself that kind of goes through my testimony of, I was an active atheist as early as elementary school. And I became a born again Christian in college, went to seminary, graduated with a master's degree in biblical studies, and then later left the faith. So I've kind of studied, not as a professional, but the psychology of conversion and deconversion. And I just loved your evolution of thought, how you went through your thinking as you journeyed through, wrestling with, whether or not you believe in God, and, what are you going to do with a family who still believes? How are you going to transition? What are you going to do with your life? How do you present your message now? People, still are angry, about their maybe some bad church experiences. And it's funny because I've heard over the years, so many people have bad church experiences and are still a Christian, or people who have had lesser, maybe bad experiences who left the faith. And it's all across the board. There's just so many people. And what I like to do now, similar to you, I like to kind of bridge that gap, try to bring people together, and try to bridge that gap between faith and non-faith. We need to coexist. We need to live together. And so I really appreciate your efforts, and I stand behind everything you do. And thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Heather, you had a question? I see it in the chat. Heather's asking if the chat just skipped down. Heather's asking if you fear for the persecution of free speech right now.
Personally, is she asking if I fear for it personally? Or not too much. When I'm out there, the only people that get angry at me would be the extreme right-wing conservative Christians. They interpret or misinterpret what I do as me trying to take over, right? Or to eradicate Christianity or God from their mind. But I even had a client that fired me. She was a Jehovah's Witness full-time door knocker, one of those, right? Who discovered my Preaching Humanist show. And she fired me, and she said, David, I suppose you think you have the same freedom that I do in free speech. I said, yes, I do. So to answer your question, not too much, maybe a little bit. The Christian right just doesn't like someone out there demanding equality. And that's really all I want, for us to be treated not as second-class citizens, but as equals. But no, not too much. Just a few people do not like me exercising the freedom to talk and show my signs.
And Mike Lewis, do you have any comments or questions?
As a recovering ex-Catholic, I've come to believe, and after studying Plato, and the influence of his school for 900 years on Western thought. Given the career-long rape of children by at least 10% of the Catholic clergy, Los Angeles Diocese, I think 1 out of every 8.75 clergy have been accused or convicted of a sex crime. I lost my faith when I was probably 10 or 11, but I believe firmly that all Catholic clergy are aware of the nature of the Catholic Church when they enter the seminary, if not before, and they willingly accept the sexual abuse of not only their own seminarian members, but of the children in the diocese. And the silence of the Catholic Church, all the clergy up to the Pope, leads me to believe that none of them believe, but they follow Plato's advice. The leaders have to use religion to control the masses and to get them to fight the wars of choice, thinking they're going to die and go to heaven. But it really leads me to believe that it's possible that no Catholic clergy believes in God. They certainly do not fear God, or else they would be apologizing to God and to the public continuously, yet there's total silence. So I wonder if the Protestant clergy are likewise. You may think that they're believers all your life, and they're really lying hypocrites like Catholic clergy. Do you think it's possible that the people you admired, look at the televangelists and radio evangelists, they seem to all be oversexed, lying hypocrites? So anyway, the question is Protestant clergy just as
Well, honestly, I'm
untruthful? Okay.
Okay. Honestly, being a very optimistic guy, most people that are in the ministry, in my background, Protestantism, and most preachers that I've known are actually in it because they believe it and they really want to help people. They're just good people. But some, yes, Joel Osteen type, the others, obviously, and most our Christian friends, our Christian friend here today, and many Christians I talked to yesterday, they would agree with us. I mean, they all know, the people that are really committed to God, they all know that there are charlatans out there. And it's usually those that want the prosperity message, living their life totally contrary to the Jesus of the Bible. The old WWJD, right? What would Jesus do? Well, those kind of guys don't really follow that. So to answer your question, in Protestantism, my experience in my past, and even today, when I talk to them, most of them really do because they believe it's just a good thing, the right thing to do. And a lot of them don't do it for the money. Even my father, all the differences we had, and even though he disowned me 2 years ago, and the whole thing, he was never in it for the money. He just did it because he thought it would help people, right, and help the world. But I don't know much about Catholicism. I'm just telling you my experience. I know there are some that are in it as hypocrites, but the majority of them I've known are genuine.
Yeah. Another point, David, the Catholic Church went one beyond Plato when he said to pretend to be the most pious, the most believing, so mothers will send their sons, say, to Vietnam. But the Catholic Church also introduced confession and the sin of masturbation. So they try to control, you know, St. Paul said, give me a child till he's 7, he'll belong to the church for life. Well, just wait till that little boy learns how to masturbate. And that damn priest, you hear the sins of the flesh when you're like, you know, in 3rd grade, 4th grade, you wonder, what the hell is that? And then you discover masturbation, and the priest is there to tell you what it means. And what a harmful, horrible thing to demoralize kids, to have them think that God is not pleased because they learned how to masturbate. And every time you do it, the devil's working on you. And then you go tell the goddamn priest. And I think that's what drove me away from Catholicism. I go, I'm not going to tell some man if I masturbate or not, you
Yeah.
know. But anyway, it causes self-loathing for all little Catholic boys, I'm sure. So
Yeah,
anyway, thank you so much, David.
Yeah, you're welcome. Let me just respond. Not only in the Catholic Church, in the Pentecostal, I know that any far right-wing movement in Christianity, like the Evangelical Baptist, the Church of Christ, some of the fundamentalists, they do teach abstinence from sex, and it's evil, it's sinful, masturbation sinful. So yeah, I've been there, done that. I went through that sexual distortion, guilt and shame. I can't get too personal on that, but I was a young man. I would preach and look down at these cute little college girls in their little mini skirts in the 70s and 80s, winking at me in the front row of the church and giving me their phone number after church. It was tough. And I didn't know what was going on biologically. I just was told it was a sin. It was the lust of the flesh. And it was tough battling against that. So there's a lot of guilt and shame. I didn't have that upbringing. Like, son, this is all natural. Just learn to control it. Learn to not use other people sexually as objects. It should be consensual and so forth. So yeah, it goes both ways, Catholicism and Protestantism, but it's usually just the far right people that take all scripture literally. The majority of Christians I know don't take some of that literally. It's kind of the cherry picking. And my progressive Christian friends are great cherry pickers. And I'm glad they do pick the cherries. I'm glad they're not living by those thorns and thistles, that pretty harsh stuff in the Bible, that outdated stuff. But we're getting better. People are changing. Many Christians are evolving like I did. They're becoming more and more progressive and liberal. They throw some of the bad stuff out of the Bible out, which is good. So they're all on a journey. Some will leave, some won't. But we have some good allies over there on the progressive Christian side. They vote like we do. They want freedom and equality for everybody. So I'm pretty optimistic about that. If we can just vote correctly coming up in November.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Dave, I also grew up Catholic, and one of my first impressions as a child was that most Catholics didn't actually believe anything, that they were just in the habit of going to church and listening to the Latin mumbo jumbo and the singing and lighting the candles and so on. What percentage, what percentage of Protestant churchgoers do you think actually believe that there's an invisible man in the sky?
Good question. Again, I can only tell you from personal experience with my little bubble of Christianity. I would say, there were probably 99% of us in our churches were totally convinced in what you say, the invisible man in the sky. We were in love with Jesus. There was one known skeptic in the whole church. My best friend's father was the known skeptic. But outside of him, at my father's church, no, they believed it. I very rarely knew anybody that had doubts back then in my background. We were all scripture given by inspiration of God people. We took it literally, and we believed in God. Yeah.
I know a lot of people say they do, and they're strong in the way they talk. But do you think the history of the Christian nations bears out the idea that they really believe in a judgmental God?
That is changing. Judgmental God, I guess I'm interpreting that as the concept of hell and torture and revenge. Those are scriptures I could quote, Old and New Testament. They're all in there. But again, many believers are using their rational morality, their innate ability to know what's right and wrong as social animals, primates, right? To know that is just not right. This concept of torture and throwing unbelievers into the lake of fire just because they don't believe, contrary, even if they're good moral people, right? But more and more people are that are believers are letting that go, that harsh part of the Bible go. Some will never let that go. They're conditioned that way. They don't have that type of thinking. My younger sister, my older brother, who died 4 years ago, they could never think outside the box. Some of us can, some can't. I just think it's a genetically inherited trait, this concept of belief in magic and supernatural for many people. I hope that answers your question.
Well, yeah, I guess that's, yeah. Thanks.
Welcome.
I would say it depends on denomination. Where David's from, Christianity is much more fundamental. In Texas and I don't know, Detroit, I don't know, but in New York, there are many Protestant denominations that are, just church on Sunday people, not super strong believers. So there's a bigger spectrum.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the Northeast, I mean, like you said, you were raised with science and education. Many of us down here weren't, so it's a big difference.
All right. Would anyone else like to speak that feels that they haven't had a chance to break into the conversation yet?
Yeah, my name's Andreas. I grew up in a totally secular family, and we were Protestant Christians by sort of culture, if you will. And the only reason we went was for community. The only reason we went to church was to to engage with people, and I think that's one of the things that you're doing that I think is very important. Because there's a lot of people out there that are surrounded by very fundamentalist people who have, especially young people who have nowhere to turn. There's a local group that I belong to in Southern California that we go to the pier in Huntington Beach where I live, and sort of counter picket humorously the fundamentalists that are preaching there, And there's always one or two young people that come up to us and say, I'm so glad you're here, because I'm totally alone,
Yeah.
I have no interest in debating, fundamentalists, because I don't even know the Bible. I didn't grow up reading it, but
Yeah.
the community thing is so important.
Yeah, that's a good point. And something I didn't really stress earlier was Christianity has been very good at telling people about meaning in life, answering existential questions, right? Giving purpose and happiness in life. We have the same thing. I mean, all you have to do, and I've committed to memory the Humanist Manifesto 3. Humans are social by nature and find meaning in relationships. Benefiting others maximizes individual happiness. Fulfillment in life, life's fulfillment, So we have ways, we have answers in naturalism to give people in humanism. You can find meaning in life, happiness in life, fulfillment, love, ethics and morals. Ethical values are derived from human need, human interest, tested by experience and consequences. So we have the same thing, but most people don't know that because too many atheists are just talking about their unbelief. They talk about, I don't believe in God. They're not talking about what we do believe. That's what I want to do. I want to share with people, here's what we do believe. Here's what secular humanism is about. We can give answers to life's questions. Atheism doesn't. So that's something I think that's very important, is to get other people involved in the secular humanist movement that are already atheist and agnostic, and share that with others and bring them over to the side of the fence and let people see that on this side of the fence, it's not this barren, wasteful land like I used to teach. Over there, it's miserable. No, it's not. It can be a wonderful life, for a lot of us. So I think that's something we need to talk about, what we do believe in rather than what we don't believe in. It's time to start changing. I hope more and more people will see this.
Oh,
rather
yeah.
than just debating.
And stress that, you know, we do have an internal moral compass, which I think is genetic probably to some, you know, at least on the gut level. And it's just a question of, you know, taking those gut feelings and orienting them in a different way. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Rhett, you have another question?
Comments, questions. Yeah, I'm just following up on some of the conversation here. I love the way that David posed the point about not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. It took a while for me too, like you, David, to kind of get over some of the similarities between, you know, some of the good things that church does. They have obviously wonderful community. Those that are more, you know, social justice oriented, you know, we need to partner with them, and I'm doing that. And I'm constantly catching myself not necessarily not avoiding some of the terms that I used to think about, you know, in Christianity. Like, you know, we can have, you know, home groups and community groups, and, you know, some people avoid using the word spiritual, but that's not necessarily, you know, all that bad. And I'm still, you know, like, even though I was kicked out of church, I would still recommend that church to somebody who was a Christian. So I don't have this hateful feelings about even my old church. I just obviously, you know, we parted ways, and I agree that we should have parted ways, especially knowing what I believe now. But I would still recommend them, you know, no hard feelings, right? I mean, there's a few individuals that I think they could have done a better job of communicating to me, and the exit could have been a smoother transition as opposed to more abrupt like it was. But that wasn't the majority of the church. That was, you know, like I said, I had a mostly positive church experience, and I think that, you know, we can try to simulate some of that in the secular community. I think that's just a huge part that's missing. So,
Sure.
I love to, you know, talk to Christians, and I love to explore the Bible, and I still have my, you know, Greek and Hebrew background. I like to translate from original languages to English, and point out, you know, different what the Bible really says. Obviously, the media loves to kind of divide, you know, the right-wing Christians from, you know, either completely secular people, and there's a big division there. Just like in politics, there's this big divisiveness between, you know, strong left and you know, very conservative right. That same division is being, you know, tried in the media with religion, and I think we need a better way of communicating and coming together, and like you said, finding our common ground and living in coexistence. So
Yeah.
just great points there.
Yeah, I agree with you. But the only thing is, for me, my take is there is a fine line of this common ground thing, which is fine. But there's some things that I will not tolerate. And when they, like Thomas Jefferson said, if it picks my pocket or breaks my leg, religion. I don't care how many gods my neighbor believes in. As long as it doesn't pick my pocket, break my leg, as long as it doesn't interfere with other people's rights and freedoms. They can't use their freedom of religion to discriminate against other people who have freedom from religion. So outside of that, and outside those that are trying to push dominionism and make this a Christian theocracy, that bothers me. That's where we need to be kind of firebrandish, back to my old style there, you know. Sometimes you have to get a little angry in those areas. And that's only from the far right. Progressive Christians agree with us on all this. So we've got to be careful when we say compromise. Sure, I mean, the good stuff in the Bible, the stuff that's throughout all of humanity, the love, the happiness, the caring for each other, sure. But when it's divisive and you take some of those outdated scriptures literally and you apply it to modernity and it doesn't work now, and it discriminates against LGBTs because Leviticus 18, Leviticus chapter 20 says so, right? That if a man is found lying with another man as with a woman, he should be put to death. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 in the New Testament, be not deceived, neither fornicators, adulterers, drunkards, or the effeminate homosexuals will enter the kingdom of God. So there's still stuff in there that I'm not going to compromise with at all. But the way I tell believers is there are a lot of things we agree with. It's just all human. all human societies have shared all these things for years, predating Christianity too. So I know it's a fine line, and nobody's perfect. I make mistakes all the time. I'm still growing and learning. But I do agree with you that it's very important to normalize it, and especially normalize atheism, because there are still people that discriminate against you if you're out there like me with an atheist t-shirt. This is what an atheist looks like. I still have people coming up to me telling me, you're going to pay for your sins, and they're angry, right? So we still have to remember that there's still a group of people like that, and we cannot compromise with everything in that book. A lot of it we can. We can respect, honor, and show dignity and worth to the human being. The criticism of an idea is not the same as a criticism of a person. We are not our idea. So people deserve dignity, but we don't have to agree with everything. And I make sure and tell believers that. There's a lot of things we agree, but some things we don't. But let's just find common ground on things we agree, work together, and so forth.
All right, Dave.
You can't do that.
All right, Dave, you have a question.
Yeah, so just, good dialogue going on in the chat box. And it just seems like for our community, for the humanist community, and it's, again, really cool to see this combination here, just a little even small sample of an ability to combine our San Diego group, Orange County group. And we're really wanting to, I think, as Andreas was saying, it's all about building community. And so the question is, how can we do more, right? How can we continue to promote this idea, A, to educate people even on humanism that don't know about it, and then B, to form pods of community so that they have a lot of the things that, that you get growing up in churches, right? That's a big miss today. And it's just a real puzzle that's out there. So I just think for all of us, it's something, that we probably all want to be thinking about and continuing to promote. If you were just on the American Humanist Association conference yesterday, they had their annual conference. I don't know if you were on that.
I didn't get a chance to watch it. I was out laboring in the fields.
Yeah, I hear you. I think they're all on YouTube. There were a number of really good presentations if anybody, didn't get to see it. But, a question came up, how many members does the AHA have? Think about our country, right, with 315 million people. Pew Research says that at least 25% check nuns in the box. That's a lot of folks. And we've got 34,000 members in the AHA.
I know.
Yeah, it's minuscule.
I know. I think about that too.
They had Jared Huffman on from Congress, who's the first congressional member to really come out as a humanist and a free thought person in the start of the Free Thought caucus, saying that with that number, but yet you've only got maybe even less than 1% of people in Congress or in politics are outed as humanists or free thought folks. So our challenge is huge. I see it. I come from a business background in addition to my missionary, childhood background, a little bit like you. But I see it more as a marketing issue for us. This marketing and promoting our message,
Yes.
as opposed to trying to convert. I think a big difference for us is we're not trying to convert. We're simply trying to educate and create these options for all the people that are there to want to join, to want to come in. And so I think that's our challenge. And so I would encourage all of us to keep thinking about that. And, let's get a discussion going, and all good ideas, let's keep them coming and keep working it. But we're definitely, I think, on a wave of something that is really going to happen here over the next number of years.
I'm hoping so. Now, I want to make it clear that when I go out there, I'm not attempting to deconvert believers. That's not my goal.
Right.
I'm just out there for those that are on the fence who have questions, and those that have already left church.
Right.
And they want to know where to go. That's my job. and to normalize it. Let them see a smiling face.
Yep.
Because most of these people never seen an atheist.
Right.
But what I'm seeing in the humanist communities is a indifference and a lack of passion for a lot of these younger people.
Mm.
The nuns, as you know, have the internet. They have Facebook. They're connected. They walk around like this all the time, right? They're losing that eye-to-eye dialogue and contact. So I don't know. Hopefully we can get some of the younger people to catch the passion of building the importance of this, the communities. That's my passion too, to see this. But honestly, I don't want to be a cynic here or pessimist, but I've seen several groups here have new leadership come up. They stay 2 or 3 months and they leave. Someone else comes up. And none of them really seem to have the passion of promoting it. And I've spoken at many of these places, and honestly, they're nice to me, but they're not really into going out, just holding up a sign and inviting people to the group and letting them know what humanism is. They think that's too Christian. They said,
Right.
David, you're too much, that reminds us of Christianity. And again, I keep telling them, but that's okay. They have a right to do that. Why wouldn't you want to tell people about something, especially those who already left God? We're not trying to deconvert. So we have to find the right people who understand the values of secular humanism and how good it really is, and have that passion to stick to it and commit their talents and abilities. I don't have business sense. I don't have Jason's brain. I'm not a scholar. I've got a limited amount of ability, but I use it, right? I use the style I have, doing what I do, because very few people do it. So finding people that will fill these niches, these spaces in our secular wheel, we need more spokes, and there's some empty places there. But it's just trying to find people that really have passion.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And I wanted to give a shout out to Jason, basically, also for all the good work that he's doing. It's been really cool to see him reemerge on the scene here, because I know he was here before. I don't think I knew him. But
Wow.
I mean, wow, you're really just doing some great things, Jason, with all the groups. I think the weekly focus is really helpful, because I don't think our groups that just meet monthly really get it done in terms of creating community, right? So we're needing more groups. So I'm really appreciative for what you're doing.
Thank you. It's
And,
actually more than a weekly focus now. It's a twice
I
weekly
know.
focus.
Yeah, I get it.
We're doing. I'm trying something. If we're talking about building humanist community, if we look at the mega churches, what do the mega churches do? They don't just have their main Sunday event. They have additional things outside of there that do for singles and accounting. And if you go to Saddleback, for example, you'll see a library, and you'll see a gift shop, and you'll see a coffee shop. And one thing that I think is a great thing to build up is doing a weekly lecture series like this, and working with all the groups in Southern California, so we can build a large audience coming together. And from that audience, we have a much larger community. Like today, I looked at the Zoom, we had 36 people. And other things that are important are doing something to be proud of as a group. One thing from the LA Times last week was, I'm trying to remember the name of the organization that's working with the city of LA, but they looked at what Redlands was doing, which was planting over the next year 12,000 trees. And this group called the City Plants, or We Plant Cities, or something like that, they came up with a new project that's public-private funded in Los Angeles to plant 90,000 trees between the summer of 2020 and 2021, and then 20,000 trees a year afterwards. That would be something for us to, if we're not in Los Angeles, look at in other cities. And that's how we're going to do it. Two quick points from me before we start to wrap up. Like I said earlier, and you said we have a weekly thing, we have a twice weekly thing. We have coffee and conversation. It's our edgier, argumentative, fun, intellectual free-for-all, mostly from a humanist perspective. Keith has come, other Christians and people of other religions have come. Here's the agenda from last night. It has what it looks like in the contact, in the login for next week. Additionally, if you're on Twitter, please follow us on Twitter. So before we wrap up today, and again, thank you so much, David, do we have any last comments or questions? And I say wrap up, but we don't have to go. We need social time now more than ever. The Zoom is going to be left on for as long as people would like to be on this. So don't feel like you have to leave if you just want to chat, because that's the whole purpose of this too. Not just so we can hear David's story, but we can hear our own stories, and we can make the relationships that right now, if this were a year ago and we were meeting in person, David and myself and Rhett and Dave and Mickey and many of us would be going out to lunch afterwards. And then we'd be going out to the pier and da-da-da-da-da. So please stick around to chat on Zoom. But any last questions or comments for David?
David, do you have any other big initiatives that you're working on? Like, you have some new initiative that you're excited about, something new that you're going to attempt to do, or just maintain all the exciting things you're already doing?
Yeah. Now with Corona, obviously, I've kind of slowed down a little bit. No, I haven't changed too much. I'm going to continue to do what I do, and trying to recruit and get other groups to do this, just to go out there with signs and pass out literature for their groups, whatever. I do want to resume tabling up in more rural areas and suburban areas north of Austin, and go back to San Antonio, and then get back to going to the different groups to speak. But I'm waiting on God to heal us from Corona, right? I used to believe that 30 years ago. Never. So I hope that answered your question. I don't have anything new yet, but I'm thinking.
Cool. Well, thanks again. Speaking of community, there is another community meeting that I'm going to be joining here soon. So I'll be signing off soon. And I noticed that my mom called me while we were meeting, so I haven't called her in a week. So I'm going to give her a buzz and then jump into another community groups. So awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to definitely follow you, and I hope to hear from you again. So maybe we can invite you to some of our other groups to speak, because I really like to hear more about what you have to say. So thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Thanks for having us.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much, David. And now I'm opening this up for social time. My dog needs a walk, and I'll be back shortly. But like Linda Richmond says, I'm verklempt. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. The thigh master is neither a thigh nor a master. Discuss.
Nice. Yeah, I remember that. Is there anybody there?
Yes.
Okay, there you are. Okay. I was going to tell Jason I probably have to leave. I need some social time with my wife. I forgot to say that in my talk. I've been married for a year. We've been together for 5 years. My second wife. She's fellow atheist, secular humanist. And she's been sitting back there making sure a cat doesn't bother me when I'm talking. So I'll probably have to leave in a couple of minutes, spend some time with her.
That was a great story. We appreciate your coming by.
Thank you.